A suspect stands accused. And now a chilling message arrives, one claiming to be from someone who knew Bryan Kohberger personally. But is it real, or a twisted game of manipulation? What you're about to hear is either a shocking testimony from someone close to the accused, or one of the most elaborate fabrications tied to this case yet. You decide. Welcome back to Mystery in Minutes. Hit subscribe and drop your thoughts in the comments when it's over. Let's begin. Someone recently reached out, said they knew Bryan Kohberger, said they had a story to tell. Now, look, like everything else in this case, we have to be cautious. I can't confirm beyond a shadow of a doubt who this person is. But I can confirm this. They've taken time to reach out, and what they shared is detailed, personal, and disturbingly consistent with public and lesser-known facts. Could it be fake? Of course. But if it's real, it may give us the most intimate look into the mind of Bryan Kohberger that we've seen yet. They asked for anonymity, claimed to be a medical professional with family to protect. They say they've been diagnosed as a psychopath since childhood. They also claim they weren't allowed to attend public school due to an incident they won't disclose. Their early life was filled with psychologists, psychiatrists, and behavioral therapists. School ended early. They finished high school by 15 and later joined the military. That's how they say they connected with Bryan, through shared paths of academia and discipline. They met Kohberger on campus. It began with a Sherlock Holmes book. The man approached Bryan, struck up a conversation. Bryan seemed hesitant, maybe intimidated. The sender says they're physically imposing, 6'3", 260 pounds muscular, but eventually, small talk gave way to deeper connection. Chemistry, biochemistry, forensics, Sherlock Holmes. They shared food, Italian food specifically. The sender claims Bryan is of Italian heritage, and this shared culture helped open him up. He relaxed, smiled, talked, asked questions about organic chemistry, shared insights into his forensic studies. According to this account, Bryan was quiet, shy, but passionate, and deeply respectful of his parents. He didn't date, not because he couldn't, but because he didn't want to risk failure in school. He saw women as a distraction. When approached by girls in public, he froze up, became visibly anxious. The message reads almost like a psychological profile dressed as a memory, detailed, precise, and strange. One moment, the author casually notes they once thought, I could befriend him, hang out, and kill him without anyone noticing. But they claim it was only morbid curiosity, never acted on, never intended. They say they remained friends, shared meals, swapped thoughts on assignments. They kept in touch via text. And for those of you who don't know, this was something that was mentioned by a neighbor of Bryan's regarding Bryan putting his DNA onto a DNA website because he was interested in finding out about his Italian heritage. So if you didn't know, now you do. I offered him at least try a few, and I could see that he wanted to say yes. However, he felt awkward and hesitant. I could see by his body language. So I grabbed a paper plate from a few students having lunch nearby and made the choice for him. He mentioned that he was experimenting with certain diets, but then I mentioned I had this stuff overnighted from my aunt in Sicily. He smiled and did actually try the foods, including the cheeses. After another hour, I mentioned that I had to go to a lecture, so I gave him a business card I had. I have my own business still, and told him that if he wanted to get together and talk about forensics, physics, chemistry, or even Sherlock Holmes, he could text me or email me. He took it, placed it in his fanny pack, I think that's what it's called, and I could see him smile, and he said, "Sure, thanks." And he then informed me that he was Bryan, and I told him my name and proceeded to shake his hand. He was a bit caught off guard by that, but shook my hand. A few days later, around lunchtime, I was around the same area, and I received this text from a number not on my contact list. However, I had an inclination that it was Bryan, as I rarely give my number out. He texted me asking if I was around, which I think he had seen me, and that's when he sent me the text, and I said, yeah. So we met up, and he had some food he made and asked me to have some. So I did. It wasn't my style of foods, as I'm a huge carnivore and Italian cuisine type of person. However, I did have some due to the gesture and effort he had made. I could see that he was a bit anxious and asked and excited for me to try his food. And when I did, it was actually really good. When I let him know, I could see a sigh of relief and half a smile. I could imagine him spending days making those food, getting it right so that we could hang out and I could try them. So, we proceeded to talk about our assignments, and we exchanged ideas and observations about each other's assignments. I will say this, Bryan isn't a huge talker. So a lot of our conversation, I did a lot of the talking, and as we hung out more and more, he opened up, relaxed, but became more engaged. I don't know how it came up, but his parents came up in a conversation, and I could see that he's very close with his parents and loves them very much. Everyone he spoke about them, he'd always have this slight smile and look of relief, if that makes sense. I remember this part where a few girls came over. We were talking about forensics, and he clamped up almost immediately and had this look of extreme nervousness and fear. It looked like to me. Once I noticed that, I took over the conversation and led it so that Bryan could maybe ease up once he saw that they were not going to bite. Long story short, I got the number of the girl I liked and Bryan did not say a word. Really, he was very nervous, and they could see that. Once they left, I asked him what he thought of her, and he said she was very pretty. But then he said that he wasn't able to date until he finished his studies and had secured long-term employment so that he wouldn't get distracted and fail. Then tried to joke with him a bit, and he laughed a bit, but then got serious and said that females were a distraction. I couldn't agree with that, and I didn't combat the conversation about it, and we continued speaking about school topics. This was a few of our first interactions when we first met, and they continued that way until we went our separate ways. Although we would meet again after a few times, as I had ended up in Boise, Idaho for about a year. But I never had any negative incidents with Bryan, and our friendship was normal. I believe one thing we both hated was talking on the phone. So when we talked or checked in to say how's it going, it was usually via text message. This is why I'm considering giving a few interviews about how Bryan was as a friend. I never did see him inflict pain on anyone. In fact, he had reached out to me about this female that showed interest in him, and he enjoyed her company. However, he did not have romantic feelings for her and asked how I could convey that to her. That right there showed me that he was actually a caring person from my experience with him. Which is why I still believe that Bryan took the plea deal to avoid being shot to death, and I will continue to support him financially wherever he is. Fortunately, I do very well financially. Therefore, I also provide further assistance if he asks. I would like to do that. Do at least one interview anonymously to protect my profession and refute all of those speculations out there of Bryan being some evil, cold, uncaring monster. So there you go. That is that. And again, does this person take all of this time to do a story that was fantasy? Who knows? Before sentencing, best-selling author James Patterson and investigative reporter Vicky Ward have released a book titled The Idaho Four, An American Tragedy. It's built from over 300 interviews with those closest to the case, and in it, something shocking is revealed. Many people close to the victims believe Maddie Mogen was the primary target of Bryan Kohberger. There's a strong consensus. Friends, family, and even investigators seem to agree. The data backs it up too. Kohberger's phone pinged near the King Road house at least 12 times before the murders, mostly at night. He was watching them, but it gets darker. One of Maddie's close friends, Emily Aunt, had recurring nightmares after the murders, dreams so vivid they blurred the line between fear and fact. She dreamed that Kohberger met Maddie at the Mad Greek restaurant where she worked with Zaina. In that dream, he expressed interest. Maddie rejected him. And that rejection, Emily believes, may have triggered the massacre. Emily's dream didn't feel random. It felt like a memory trying to surface. In her recurring nightmare, she saw Kohberger approaching Maddie at the restaurant, asking her out. Maddie, polite but firm, turns him down. And something in him snaps. Vicky Ward describes how Emily explained that dream. It was the only thing that made sense. They didn't recognize him when they saw his photo. But this dream, that was a story that seemed to fit the feeling everyone had. That dream has stuck with Emily and others. Even the surviving roommate Dylan described seeing a tall man in black, masked, walking through the house, holding what looked like a black vacuum. she was frozen in fear. Bill Thompson, the lead prosecutor, confirms that Maddie was likely the first to die. The knife sheath bearing Kohberger's DNA was found under her body. That single mistake unraveled everything. For 7 weeks, Kohberger walked free. The public had no idea who he was, but those close to the victims began putting together a pattern. It was as if Maddie had been chosen, watched, and ultimately hunted. Kohberger's background in criminology only made the crime more chilling. He knew what to do. He almost pulled off the perfect murder. If not for that sheath, this story might never have been told. Through Emily, we also learn what Dylan, the surviving roommate, went through. She saw the figure, the black clothing, the mask, but couldn't move. Friends later said it all felt surreal, like a horror movie happening in real life. The investigators didn't get most of these insights until months later. Emily's version of events, her dream, and the real facts started to align. Even Kohberger's silence during interrogation echoed that eerie stillness from Dylan's night of terror. The book is more than just an investigation, it's a tribute. Vicky Ward and James Patterson make it clear. This is about Madison, Kaylee, Ethan, and Zana. Their hopes, dreams, and stories are told in full. Stacy Chapin, Ethan's mom, said something powerful. "I'm so glad this book exists because it means they're not forgotten. You don't just read about the Idaho Four. You meet them, you feel their energy, and you mourn the futures they lost." Weeks ago, Kohberger took a plea deal, finally admitting to the murders. For many, that brought a shred of closure, but questions linger. Why Maddie? Was it rejection? Was it obsession? Or something even darker? Patterson says out of all his nonfiction books, this is the one he's most proud of. Because it does what true crime should always do, focus on the victims, not just the killer. If you've made it this far, you're the kind of person who wants truth, not just headlines. We'll continue following every angle, every trial, every unheard voice. Subscribe to Mystery in Minutes for more untold stories, emotional testimonies, and truth that cuts through the silence. And in the comments, if the knife sheath hadn't been found, do you think Kohberger would have gotten away with it?